What's up, everybody? Josue Kula here. Today we gonna continue working on integrating payments API to facilitate customer making payments. I know this has been taking a little bit of time, but I want to make sure that we achieve fitment as we integrate these mobile payments or the Stripe payments API as well. In today's video, I'm gonna continue working on the payments method, but you might notice that there is no preparation here. I'll be freestyle coding, so expect from me to make some mistake, have some failure and some success along the way. Okay? Now, without further ado, let's continue working on our payments method. As I mentioned in my previous video, we want to facilitate a one-click button payments from the customer perspective so they can be able to make a payment easily. Instead of creating or inserting their payments record where they're making a payment, they can also save that particular payments method so it can be reused in the future payments. So we're gonna look at the payments method. What is the payments method right here? This is our payments method. We are going to create an endpoint that capture payments method. For instance, as of now, we've been spending time for the Vodafone payments method, which is called M-Pesa. It's a mobile finance payments method. As you and I know that the majority of developing countries, they do not have access to credit card and debit card. Some of them do have access to credit card and debit card, but the majority of the population do not have access to credit and debit card. So we want to facilitate payments for a regular user that can, use our application. We're gonna spend time on the payments, adding a payments method. We gotta create a REST API endpoint that will capture the payments method from the user. No user interface here. You need to have some experience understanding how REST API works, having an idea, about data structure, tables, and a data model as well. Okay, so for this particular payments method, we do have the transaction type. We're expecting to capture the customer information. We need to know who's making payments, and also capture, because the payments will now be made directly, the payments will be made via a third-party API. So we want to insert or save the records or some payloads that will facilitate us to make a payment on behalf of the customer. What do I mean by that? So we have our customer information, the name, the last name, and the phone number from which they can make a payment. We have a third-party API that need to match the customer information to their payment service. And we also have our application in the middle. We want to be able to record customer information. It's not as simple as just getting the phone number and directly making a payment, but we need to prepare what the third-party API is expecting. We need to prepare those payload as a payment method so that by the time the customer click pay using X mobile service, we will automatically extract those required payload from the customer payments method and make a payment on their behalf. Okay, so for this instance, we have the payments method. Unfortunately, for some services, we should capture the know your customer, but I'm still waiting for some of the third-party API to accept my testing application. It's not as simple as with the Stripe. If I want to show you what Stripe does, with Stripe, it's easier to start testing application. You can just simply register with your email and use the credential and start testing application. But some of the mobile service payments, like the Airtel, this one, even if they do have the documentation available, but you need more to get your application approved. As you can see, my application right here is still pending, so I need to wait for whoever on the technical side to accept my application. It's just a testing application, but I need approval before I continue. Yeah, but today we're gonna spend time on the Vodafone, because since Vodafone, it's a little bit easier to integrate. You just need to register with your email, add services, and start testing. While it's taking time to respond, I'm gonna go back to the backend so we can continue. Okay, this is our model for the payments method. We have everything we need so far. We need to save a payload. It's a payload, but it's kind of like a specific record payment for the Vodafone. Okay, so we have our payments. Let's go to, we need to create a serializer so we can serialize this model, the payments method. After we serialize, we are going to create a API endpoints and start testing. So what are we gonna record? In this payments method, we are going to record the payments method, be it a mobile or credit card, debit card, or the special coupon. We have to make sure that payments method will be primary, true or false. The transaction type, we have different transaction type. It's either the customer to the business or the business to the customer, because we also need to be able to refund. We can refund the customer from the payments method, which is gonna be easier, for the application. Instead of looking the way we can refund the customer, we can just go to the payments method, select one of the record, and refund them. Let's go to the serializer. I think we've started already in the serializer. Right here, we have to stop because I wanted to do the KYC. I wanted to capture the customer information so we can identify them before allowing them to make a payment, but there is no way. Let me show you something. If we go on the Vodafone mobile payments API, if we click on query beneficiary name, the query beneficiary name service allows the client's application to verify the customer, to know the customer from their phone number. Unfortunately, where I'm planning to deploy the application, Vodafone is now, providing that service. As you guys can see, the query beneficiary name is only available on this market, on Ghana. So I've sent them an email asking them if they can add this service on DXC, where my application will be deployed, because we want to be able to identify the customer. The identification will consist of capturing the phone number and making sure that if we check on the Vodacom system, the name that we retrieve will match the name in the accounts. If the name doesn't match, we are going to assume that they're trying to use somebody else's phone to make a payment, which is considered sort of not correct, because maybe there will be a fraud, somebody using somebody's phone number to make a payment. I couldn't do that, so the reason why I stopped, because there is no way to identify the customer making a payment on DXC. It's only on Ghana. So I've already sent them a message if they can do that for us. Okay, let's go back to the backend. We are going only to capture the payload for a customer to make a payment to a business, to our business or the application. What's happening right here we are getting the service, the transaction type, the service, and the payments method from a customer. And we want to grab the payload that the API will expect. Because the customer, the only thing they have is their phone number, right? They're using their phone number and the application download on their phone to authorize payments. But our application, the client's application that communicates between the API and the customer actions, is to abstract all the actions. The reason why we have to call this service, let's call from third-party API dot payments method mobile payments imports. What are we trying to do here? We're trying to create the payload that the third-party API will expect from us to make a payment on behalf of our particular customer. This is gonna be our payload, and we have a data model somewhere on this file. As you guys can see, we have to make sure that the payload a customer or our application will send on behalf of the customer to make a payment. We want to make sure that all the fields will match what the server is expecting. We've created a Python data class so we can convert that Python data class to a dictionary, a Python dictionary, and make that a JSON and send that to a third-party API to make a payment. So this M-Pesa payment you are seeing right here, this is the future payload that we need to save. But we're not gonna save that as a JSON object, we're gonna save that as a hexadecimal encoding string, so it can be easier to be retrieved from the database, update that with new value, and send that to make a payment. So we need to import this class. If you want me to explain to you, I may not explain every field, but you can see all the field makes sense. The input amount will be the amount, the country, the customer MSI SDN, which is the phone number, the service provider, the provider code to be the organization, the client's organization, the third-party conversation ID will be the transaction ID on the client side, meaning the application client, the client's application. The transaction reference is the transaction reference, the third-party API to track that particular transaction if you want to refund that in the future. And the purchase item description, which in our case will be XYZ service, and so forth. Let's import this one. To importing, we are going to import into our payments method. Let's go to serializer. Yeah, from third API module, payments model imports M-Pesa payments. The M-Pesa payment is just a payload. Okay. So we have the default value, and we don't want to insert the amount of money that the customer has to pay. We don't have to insert that. This will be inserted when the customer is ready to make a payment. We are just preparing the payments method. What else do we need? We need the input purchase item description, which means why the customer is purchasing that particular service or that product. Let's say input transaction reference. This is the transaction reference that the third party is expecting us to send as a transaction ID for that particular payment. We can just put anything because we're gonna modify that before we make a payment. This is just preparing the payments payload. Input purchase item description, why the customer is buying that. We can say service 1. And last but not least, the provider input provider service code. This is the organization, meaning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that is the payload. I know you might be asking yourself why you have to do it this way. Why don't you just do it every time a customer has to make a payload? The reason why I'm doing that this way, because I want to create or prepare for the extensibility of our code base. Just in case the third-party API changed the provisions or the requirement in terms of what type of payload you need to change, I don't have to go somewhere to change everything. I don't have to have multiple places to change the code. I can just directly go to our model, the model of the payload right here on the data class. I update that. And if I update that, everywhere I'm calling an instance of this model class, it's gonna cry out, it's gonna complain, hey, you need X field, and it will be able to be updated easily. You don't have to do it this way, but when you're writing code, you need to write code not only to make it work efficiently, but I also need to think about extensibility in terms of adding new features. Most importantly, when you're integrating a third-party API that you don't have control, you have to submit to the requirements of that particular API. Is there anything else we need? So far, good. We don't need anything. So we've collected the transaction type, the service type, the service, and the payment method. Let's see how many fields we need. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we need 7 fields. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, we need 7 fields. So far we have 1, 2, 3. Okay, what else we need? Okay, we just extract the 3. The remaining will be automatic on the payload. Something like its primary will be automatic right here on validate data. The user will be also automatic coming from the validate data here. So the version, the default version is 1, so the version is not compulsory, it's optional. Now, we're not gonna save this payload as we could save it as a data class, but we don't have a type data class on the database formats. We need to save it like a hash string, right? We need to convert this to a JSON. Right, we gotta convert this to a JSON. To convert that to a JSON, before saving, we are going to convert this variable to a walrus variable. So this one will be, and we call this payload. And we convert that to a dictionary. We pass the M-Pesa payload. If this looks sort of complicated, I would explain in a couple seconds. If we go back to our model, we want to make sure that all the fields will match what the server is expecting, right? We've created a Python data class, so we can convert that Python data class to a dictionary, a Python dictionary, and make that a JSON and send that to a third-party API to make a payment. So this M-Pesa payment you are seeing right here, this is the future payload that we need to save, but we're not gonna save that as a JSON object. We're gonna save that as a hexadecimal encoding string. so it can be easier to be retrieved from the database, update that with new value, and send that to make a payment. Okay, so it's gonna be a JSON payload, but we need to encode that. Let's import the BLAKE2 from the lib. Import from you can just import #lib, and from right here we are going to create a BLAKE2 instance. BLAKE2 #lib BLAKE2. We can either use the BLAKE2 S or BLAKE2 B. It looks like the B is faster than the BLAKE2 S. I can't remember, but we're gonna use the BLAKE2 B, which is faster. The digest size will be 64 bytes. We have to use the key. I think the key I'm gonna use here, the key will be the public. Let's just use the key, so it can be consistent. We're just gonna use the key from the clients, right? Get environment. We're gonna use the M-Pesa key as the key to. Okay, we create our objects. Actually, the key has to be a byte. The key should not be a string. To do that, we are going to do b bytes times plus. We encode this one to UTF. We're creating a key that will allow us to encrypt our JSON payload. The next one we need to do, I think we are going to hash it. We update our hash by passing the JSON payload, but the JSON payload right here, as of now, this JSON payload is a string. We need to convert that to a byte string. To convert that to a byte string, we are going to create a byte string, and we concatenate a byte string to a byte string. JSON payload encode UTF-8. This converts the string to a byte string, and the byte string plus byte string equal byte string. Okay, next thing we need to do after we update, we need to create a digest. We are going to create a hexadecimal digest. Hash hexadecimal digest. And this is gonna be a string. We can call it encrypted payload. Encrypted payload, and we return encrypted payload. Or instead of saying encrypted payload, we can just return that directly. Return encrypted payload. Oh, yeah, we return encrypted payload, and we are going to call our. So this one is static, so we have to make sure we are not using the self static method. So let's remove the self right here. Okay. Self sign BLAKE2 payload JSON. It's signed. What we are doing right here, we are converting all this payload as a string, like as a hash string, and save it to the database so it can be easier for us to retrieve it. You might be thinking, oh, it's gonna take long for you to decrypt that. No, it's BLAKE2 is not that, doesn't take much for computation to decrypt, so it's gonna be faster enough, you know, for us to retrieve that back, update that, and bring it back as a JSON object and send it as a payload to make a payment. This seems complicated, but it's good for, again, for extensibility, for modification in the future. If the API change, we can change the data class, add new property or attributes, or remove attributes, and automatically test and updates wherever we are creating an instance of this data class. Now, this one will return a hexadecimal long string, so we need to pass it to a variable somewhere. And that variable is the one we're gonna use for the transaction payload. So we're gonna call this transaction payload equal, we sign JSON payload, and from here we can start creating our, we are going to refactor this method, you know, later. We gonna make sure there's all these parts, because there will be a lot of condition, like in this condition, a lot of branching. The first branching is conditional on if the transaction type is debit and the service mobile payments. When we integrate the Stripe API, we also gonna prepare, because Stripe API has also different payload you need to send to make a payment. I think the Stripe API is really straightforward, because you wanna register the customer, create a payments method, create a payment intent, and confirm a payment intent. But I'm gonna take a time where we go through how you can, you know, use the Stripe payments method. Okay, now we have everything. Now we need to create our payments method. The name of our class is model is payments. Let me look at that. Yeah, the model is name is payments method. From model imports payments method. We don't need to import the file, we need to import the class. Yeah. We need to import the class. Let's verify that we are importing the class. Yeah, we are not importing the, yeah, we are not importing the module, we're importing the class. Okay, we need to replace that. Right here, creates payments method for Vodafone. Payments method objects creates. So the creates here. What are some fields we need? Is primary. His primary will be automatically updated. Version will be automatically updated. So the first three we have service payments method. Let's do this. Payments method, service transaction, payments method equal is payments method is method. Service will be service. What is transaction type? The transaction type Trans type will be trans type. What else? Transaction payload, we have our payload right here. Transaction payload will be trans payload. The remaining fields like a user or its primary and version, right? 1, 2, 3. Okay, the 3 remaining fields will be automatic. So to get that automatically from the validate data, we just gonna spread them. We are going to spread them right here. Validate data. So what's gonna do, it's going to find the fields that already exist, skip them, and the fields that are not exist will be considered. And I'm freestyle coding right here. If something happened, you gotta bear with me because hopefully it works. And we're gonna call this variable payments method. And we are going to return, okay, we return the payments method. Yeah, that's the way we are going to sign our payload to hexadecimal string and save it as a string instead of saving it as a long JSON object. Okay, now we need to test it. We need to create an endpoint. We are going to use this, our payments method serializer. We're just gonna test for these 2 cases. The transaction type has to be debit and the service has to be M-Pesa. The payments method has to be to the mobile payments method. Let's go to our view. This is for know your customer, and it's not available in the markets where we are planning to deploy this application. Unfortunately, we're not gonna use the know your customer right here. I'm gonna have to call them and to call the Vodafone service, and if not, beg them, ask them if they can turn on that service on the market. If not, we're just gonna skip. It's gonna be painful, but we are going to skip the know your customer, the ability to verify the customer identity before making the payments. So this one is gonna be a different endpoint of view, customer to business, customer to business view, generic view. It's gonna be create API view, permission, customer need to be authenticated, permission is authenticated, version class, we are going to use the versioning class, serializer class, we are going to use the serializer class, our newly created serializer class. Let's import the, we're not gonna use this, so we don't need that. We could also comment this out because we're not using that, we just have to comment it. So let's import, we need to import the newly created serializer class, the payments method serializer. Where are we gonna import that? Somewhere right around here. Subscription serializer. Okay, so recognize that. And we can, is it a model serializer? Yeah, so if it's a model serializer, let's try first make it a model serializer. If it's a model serializer, we need to get the query set. Query set, we need also to import the model, subscription model. Let's import payments method. We have a user. We are going to prefetch that, select prefetch from the user standpoint. Okay, so that's the only foreign key we have. So we got prefetch that from payments method, objects, on, Let's see if we have a select prefetch here. See how I use the select prefetch here. Select prefetch user. Hopefully that's correct. So I'm going to verify the documentation online. Select prefetch. Oh, prefetch selected. That's the correct. Yeah, it's prefetch selected. That's the correct keyword. Prefetch selected user. The prefetch selected user make a join for us. So this should be this way. That's why they all comes after the prefetch selected, because this one make a join and then return a query set. Okay, now let's go create the URL and see if we can test it, because it's already past 1 hour. Even if I'm trying my best not to go over 1 hour, but it is what it is. Let's go to the URL, subscription URL, router imports, router register. This is gonna be subscription Vodacom/payments. M-Pesa customer to business. The base name will be M-Pesa paid. Yeah, let's just name it M-Pesa pay. M-Pesa pay. Let's verify the URL how it's gonna be. To do that, we are going to go to our test URL self pay with M-Pesa URL equal reverse subscription M-Pesa pay. Okay, let's create a new test post creates payments method creates Vodafone or Vodacom payments. The first thing we need to confirm that we are going to get the URL. What is the name of the URL? Pay with M-Pesa URL. Tag pay with. Oh, I cannot say that. I should name that pay with M-Pesa. Payments method. Payments method URL. This is a universal URL. It's for everybody. Even the name of the URL right here should be changed to pay method. Register payments. That makes sense. Payments register or register payments. This is logical because this is where user register the payments. You want to make sure that it's gonna be universal. It's not something exclusively for M-Pesa. Let's go to our test. It's gonna be register payments method URL payments method. Okay, let's test. Tag equal payments method. See if you're gonna recognize the URL. Let's say customer to business view as no attribute gets extra actions. Okay, I know what's going on. We can move this guy right here. path. Register payments. And this is because we are using a generic view. We are now using a model view set. Oh, we don't have to use a base name, a property unknown property. Just have to use the name. Okay, so we have to register payments. This URL works, and this URL is exclusively for creation, because it's exclusively for creating. No, even the name here doesn't match. See, it should be payments method API view. That's the correct name. Okay. Payments method API view. It's not exclusively for M-Pesa. It's for all the payments method. Even if we add a new payments method from Stripe, we're still gonna use the endpoints. But what we're gonna do, we are going to rewrite in such a way that we make it clean. Each one of the branching conditioner has to have its own function. So this function can be a little bit, this method can be a little bit shorter. I mean, shorter doesn't mean performance, but shorter in terms of readability, to make it easier for the next developer to read that. Because this if condition will continue. Or we can also use the switch or use any sort of branching to make it look cleaner and readable. Okay, now let's continue and try to test before we end this video. Now that we have our URL, the URL will be used for posting. We need authentication. Let's create a self-client false authenticated. False authenticated. Self-user, we just authenticate that because the endpoint is protected by authentication. False self-client, let's create our payload. And this is a payload the user need to send to create a payment method. What are we expecting on the payload? We're expecting the version. Let's try version 2. We don't really need the version since it's gonna be automatic. We need on our serializer payments method. We don't need this one. It might be sent, but we really don't need that. We need a payments method, which gonna be either mobile or credit card. So let's send the payments method. It's gonna be mobile. What else do we need? We need a service. In our case, we are trying to check the service has to be M-Pesa. The user has to be self-user ID. What else do we need? His primary will be false. His primary, let's say it's primary false. What else do we need? Since transpayload is required, we can just say something with transpayload. Transpayload. We really need that. We don't need that, but we can just put something. What else? Actually, we are going to need the phone number of the user because when they're creating the, yeah, we're still testing, you know, when we want to go to a production, we're gonna, you know, tweak it a little bit to make it better, you know. Actually, the phone number will be a validated and a active phone number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 more fields. 1, 2, 3, 4. Transaction type. The transaction type will be, yeah, we need a transaction type will be debits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What is the one that misses? Transaction payload, payment payload, service, user, or version. Version is now required. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, clients, let's post now and see what's gonna happen. Remember, the versioning is required. Yeah, so we need versioning is required. And this, what's we're gonna pass? We're gonna pass the payload. We're gonna pass the URL. Now coupon payload and HTTP option. And we are going to test our response to see what the response will look like. Print response contents. And this is integration testing because we are going through all these small piece of components of that make up the old view. So the view, this view is made up of, you know, serializer, versioning, authentication. So this is called the integration testing. Let's test and see what's gonna happen. Our primary does not exist, so even if we've created we update the field in our payments method model, we have not yet created a migration. So we need to create a migration. Python make migrations subscription. Let's continue testing. This video is getting long, but I'm gonna make sure that we fix that in the next video. Okay, this is not what we want. We don't want us to get this field. We are going to go on our test. We're gonna go on our test right here, remove this field. It's probably gonna complain that we need that. Let's see what's gonna happen. Yeah, trans payload field require. So if it's required, we need to modify that. It's clear we're gonna send it, but we need to modify that on the serializer. Are we modifying that on the serializer? 1, 2, 3, 4. If that's the case, we're gonna do this because we're gonna do user equal to validate data pop user or none. What else we need? Is primary. It's gonna be validate data pop is primary. Okay. Or none. What else? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Version is optional. Okay, let's try again. We're trying to create a payment method right here. That's what we were expecting. I know it took a little bit of time, but we want to make sure that the payload we'll be sending in the future is a digest hexadecimal string, and this string here, this string you are seeing right here, this one is the one that before we make a payment, we are going to verify that. We are going to reconvert that to a JSON object, and we reconvert that to a dictionary, from JSON to a dictionary, and we compare the fields of this to the fields of what is defined to our payload model, this one. And then we're gonna update value, and then we're gonna make a payment to the third-party API. The third-party API right here, in the case of the Vodafone service. So all this value you are seeing right here, this one actually it's supposed to be a Python dictionary. We're gonna spread a Python dictionary right here from this payment method, and then we're gonna make a payment. If we make a payment, the response will be something like a payment was made, and if the payment is made to the third-party API, we confirm that the payment is made, then we're gonna go record a payment in our table payments, or somewhere here, and record the payments in our table right here, payments, and then send the user email that, hey, you've successfully made your payment. So the payment has to be made to the third-party API. The third-party API will confirm to us, hey, this user has successfully made a payment, and we're gonna take that record, simply just record that to our database, hey, he made a payment. That's all for our video. That's all for this video today.